Ryan's Office Revenge.
Gordon, can you explain why the Federal Highway Administration is asking about foundation reports from 2018? That was 8:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, and I'd already been through 2 cups of coffee that tasted like they scraped it off the bottom of a construction boot. But sure, I could handle this just like I'd handled the dozen other crisis calls this month and the 20-something client meltdowns before that. I took a breath, adjusted my reading glasses, and said what I always say when I'm about to pull an entire project back from the edge of disaster. I'm on it. That's what I did for 18 years. I was the guy who made things work. Name's Gordon Hayes, I'm 48, and for nearly 2 decades, I'd been the one keeping Apex Infrastructure Solutions from falling apart, especially our crown jewel, the $290 million Interstate 85 bridge reconstruction project. This wasn't some small-time local job. We're talking federal highway funds, DOT oversight, Environmental Protection Agency, clearances and safety protocols that could shut down the entire project if someone sneezed wrong. I made it all run smooth as a Swiss watch, quiet, reliable, never missed a deadline. That's how I liked it. Didn't need my name in the company newsletter or fancy LinkedIn posts about synergy and paradigm shifts. Just wanted my work respected and my expertise valued. When inspectors showed up unannounced, they knew they could trust my documentation. When federal auditors came through, they found everything in order because I'd already triple-checked it myself. My late wife Sarah used to joke that I read federal regulations like other men read sports magazines. She wasn't wrong. I knew which forms needed notarized signatures, which ones required witness statements, and which ones would get you blacklisted from federal contracts if you submitted them 5 minutes late. That knowledge didn't come from business school or management seminars. It came from 18 years of showing up, paying attention, and learning from every mistake I watched other people make. Spoiler alert, none of that mattered anymore, not to the people making decisions. See, if you've ever been the guy who keeps everything from going to hell while everyone else gets promoted for looking busy in meetings, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The guy who actually reads the fine print, who knows which inspector likes his coffee black and which one will shut you down for a paperwork typo. The guy who builds relationships over handshakes and keeps his word, even when nobody's watching. You know what that gets you these days? A target on your back from kids who think experience is just another word for obsolete. Anyway, back to Tuesday. I'd just gotten our Federal Highway Administration rep, Patricia Moore, calmed down about some soil testing discrepancy when he walked into my office. Brandon Walsh, the CEO's 28-year-old son, who'd somehow become VP of Innovation despite never setting foot on a construction site. The kid looked like he stepped out of a tech startup commercial. Perfect hair, expensive suit, always carrying around an iPad like it was the Holy Grail. "Hey, Gordon," he said, settling into the chair across from my desk like he owned the place. "We need to talk about streamlining your position." My stomach dropped. Streamlining is corporate speak for we're about to screw you over and then act like it's good for everyone. Brandon had been floating around the executive floor for 6 months, fresh MBA in hand, talking about digital transformation and artificial intelligence like he'd invented them personally. Kid thought he could revolutionize construction with drones and apps. I'd watched him present PowerPoints about optimizing workflow efficiency to guys who'd been pouring concrete since before he was born. Real inspiring stuff, if you'd never actually managed a project that involved more than ordering office supplies. The first time he tried to muscle in on my bridge project, he asked Patricia Moore if we could speed up the environmental impact assessment with automated compliance software. Patricia just stared at him like he'd suggested building the bridge out of Legos and good intentions. She's been handling federal highway projects since the Clinton administration. She doesn't suffer fools gladly, and she doesn't pretend technology can replace actual knowledge. I smoothed that over too. Always did. Part of the job, keeping clients happy even when your own people were trying their best to torpedo the relationship. So when Brandon showed up at my desk that Tuesday morning, sipping his matcha latte and talking about innovation, I knew what was coming. Still played dumb though. Sometimes it's better to let people dig their own holes. "Streamline how?" I asked, keeping my voice level. "Well," he said, pulling out his phone and glancing at it like he was expecting a text from the future. "I've been analyzing our project management structure, and honestly, Gordon, you're doing a lot of manual processes that we could automate." Manual processes, like the 47 different federal compliance checkpoints I'd memorized, like the relationships I'd built with DOT inspectors over 2 decades of shared coffee and honest work, like knowing exactly which forms needed to be filed in triplicate and which ones would get you blacklisted if you submitted them late. Like understanding that federal safety protocols weren't suggestions you could optimize away with the right software. "What kind of automation?" I asked. Brandon's eyes lit up like a kid who'd just discovered video games. AI-powered project tracking, real-time compliance monitoring, digital communication platforms that eliminate human error. He paused dramatically, probably the way they taught him in business school. "The future, Gordon." Somewhere in Washington, D.C., a federal safety inspector probably felt a disturbance in the force, but I nodded, took notes on a legal pad while he talked about cloud-based solutions and machine learning algorithms, smiled like he'd just explained how to split the atom. Because that's what you do when someone with daddy's last name decides to step over your 18 years of experience to chase the latest tech trend that some consultant sold them for 6 figures. The rest of the week was the usual scramble, but with an edge of something darker hanging in the air. Environmental compliance flagged a wetlands issue that could have delayed us 6 months. I handled it with 2 phone calls and a site visit I'd already planned 3 weeks ahead. State DOT questioned our traffic control plan during rush hour modifications. I had the backup documentation ready because I'd run the scenarios back in April when we first submitted the proposal. Brandon disappeared into back-to-back innovation workshops with consultants who charged $500 an hour to tell him what I could have explained for free over coffee. These weren't construction people. They were tech guys in expensive suits who'd never worn a hard hat or stood in the rain watching concrete cure. But they had PowerPoint presentations full of buzzwords and promises about revolutionizing the industry. I kept doing what I'd always done, making sure the work got done right while everyone else played corporate theater. By Friday afternoon, I'd gotten the EPA clearance signed off after a conference call that lasted 3 hours but saved us 2 months of delays. The traffic plan was approved by both state and local authorities. And Patricia Moore from Federal Highway Administration sent me a personal email, not copied to anyone else, saying the project was ahead of schedule and under budget. That doesn't happen often in federal work. Actually, it almost never happens. "Gordon," her email read, "whatever you're doing over there, keep doing it. This is the smoothest federal highway project I've overseen in 15 years. Your attention to detail and proactive communication has been exemplary." An actual compliment from the feds. I printed that email and put it in my project file, right next to the others I'd collected over 18 years. Not because I needed the validation, but because I'd learned that in corporate America, documentation is everything, especially when people start questioning your value. At 4:58 p.m., my calendar pinged. Meeting, 5 p.m. Conference room B. No agenda, no attendees listed, just that cold corporate summons that makes your blood run cold. I'd seen this movie before. Late Friday afternoon meetings with no details are never good news. When you've worked in corporate America long enough, you develop instincts like an old hunting dog. You can smell layoffs coming like rain on hot asphalt. You can tell when the budget meetings go too long and too quiet. You know what it means when executives start having conversations behind closed doors and then get really friendly when they see you in the hallway. But this felt different. Heavier. Like the moment before lightning strikes when all the hair on your arm stands up. I grabbed my project folder, the one I always carried for client meetings, and walked down that beige hallway like a man walking to his own execution. 20 years ago, this hallway felt like possibility. Now it felt like a corridor in a hospital where they deliver bad news. Brandon was already seated when I walked into conference room B, with Lisa Stone from HR beside him. Lisa looked like she'd rather be anywhere else on earth. Root canal, tax audit, traffic court, anywhere. She had that expression people get when they're about to do something they know is wrong but can't figure out how to stop it. Brandon didn't even look up from his phone until I closed the door behind me. Kid was probably checking his Instagram or whatever these young executives do when they're about to ruin someone's life. "Gordon," he said with fake sincerity that would have made a used car salesman cringe, "thanks for coming on short notice." I sat down and waited. Sometimes silence is the best tool you have. Let them dig their own hole while you watch. I'd learned that from my father, who spent 35 years working construction before his back gave out. "Son," he used to say, "never interrupt your enemy when he's making a mistake." Brandon cleared his throat and straightened his tie like he was practicing for a TED Talk about disrupting the construction industry. Lisa shuffled papers and avoided eye contact like she was trying to disappear into the conference room chairs. "So," Brandon began, "this isn't easy, but after careful analysis of our operational efficiency metrics and strategic realignment objectives." He glanced at Lisa like he wanted applause for using grown-up words he'd probably learned in some management seminar. "We've decided your role no longer aligns with our digital transformation initiatives." Translation: "You're fired, old man. Make your room for the robots and the algorithms and whatever other shiny new toys we think can do your job better." I looked at Lisa. She wouldn't meet my eyes, just stared at her hands like they held the secrets of the universe. "We appreciate everything you've done," Brandon continued, chipper as a GPS giving directions to nowhere. "But we're transitioning to automated project oversight, more streamlined, more efficient, more aligned with industry best practices." Industry best practices. From a kid who thought you could manage federal highway projects with smartphone apps. I didn't blink, didn't react, just sat there like a man listening to weather reports. "You're firing me," I said. Not a question, just a statement of fact. A pause. Long enough to let the awkwardness settle into the room like dust after an explosion. "It's not personal, Gordon," Brandon said, pulling out his phone again like he had somewhere more important to be. "We'll be handling project management through our new digital systems. Everything's automated now, more efficient." And there it was, the knife dressed up as progress. The corporate execution disguised as innovation. Lisa slid a manila envelope across the table like she was serving divorce papers. Severance package, non-disclosure agreement. Probably some clause about not bad-mouthing the company on social media. Same old script they use when they want you gone but don't want you talking about why. "Any questions?" Brandon asked, already typing on his phone, probably updating his LinkedIn about successfully implementing strategic workforce optimization or some other buzzword garbage. I opened the envelope and scanned the papers inside. Standard stuff. Couple months of pay in exchange for going quietly into retirement. Then I did something that probably surprised both of them. I smiled. Not bitter, not angry. Just the quiet smile of a man who knows something you don't. The kind of smile that makes smart people nervous and dumb people overconfident. "No questions," I said. I stood up, straightened my jacket, and slid the envelope back across the table like a receipt for a meal I didn't order. Then I walked out. No drama, no shouting, no slamming doors or dramatic speeches about loyalty and dedication. Just a quiet exit that probably disappointed Brandon more than anything else. He wanted fireworks to justify his decision. Wanted me to lose my temper so he could tell his father and the board that Gordon Hayes was clearly past his prime, too emotional, too set in his ways to adapt to the modern business environment. But I wasn't giving him that satisfaction. Instead, I went back to my office, my corner office, with 18 years of earned respect built into every filing cabinet and project binder, and sat down at my computer. I didn't delete files or send angry emails to the entire company distribution list, didn't post bitter updates on LinkedIn about ageism in the workplace. Just opened one specific folder. Active, federal contracts and compliance requirements. I pulled out a flash drive from my desk drawer, the one I kept for backup purposes, and copied one file. Not for revenge, not for leverage, for protocol. Because in 18 years of managing federal projects, I'd learned that documentation isn't just important, it's survival. Then I packed up the few personal items that mattered. Coffee mug with a chip in the handle that Sarah had bought me 10 years ago. Photo of her at the company Christmas party, the one where she wore that red dress and told everyone who'd listen how proud she was of her husband's work. Small American flag pin from my first federal highway project, back when I was green enough to think good work automatically meant job security. Left everything else. The pens, the staplers, the motivational calendars that HR distributed every January. On my way out, I passed Brandon in the hallway, laughing with someone from accounting about weekend plans and craft beer. He didn't even notice me leaving with my cardboard box. Perfect, because what came next, he never saw coming. Outside, the sky was gray and heavy, the kind of weather that makes you think about change. I stood there for a moment in the parking lot, looking back at the building where I'd spent the better part of 2 decades. Not feeling sorry for myself, just taking inventory, processing. My truck started on the first try, same as it had for the past 150,000 miles. Reliable. Like everything else they'd just thrown away. I drove home not because I was defeated, but because I had work to do. The kind of work that requires a clear head and steady hands. By the time I got home, I'd already started planning. See, I'm not the kind of guy who goes quietly into retirement. I'm the kind who reads every contract, remembers every clause, follows every regulation to the letter. The kind who doesn't just shake hands on a deal. I keep the paperwork to prove it happened, filed in chronological order with backup copies in fireproof storage. Some people call it being anal retentive. I call it being professional. 8 months ago, after a multi-agency safety audit nearly shut down the entire bridge project because some previous project manager had cut corners on environmental documentation, I'd pushed through a contract amendment, Amendment 12D, Section 7, that specifically named me as the mandatory federal safety coordinator for the duration of the project. It wasn't ego, it was continuity. Patricia Moore from the Federal Highway Administration had specifically requested it after we'd had 3 different project managers cycle through in 2 years, each one learning the regulations from scratch while the project hemorrhaged time and money. Gordon, she'd said during that conference call where we nearly lost the entire contract, we can't afford another personnel shuffle. Too much institutional knowledge walks out the door every time someone new comes in. Put it in writing that you're staying on this project through completion. So we did. Amendment 12D, tied to contract FB 2902023, executed, time-stamped, filed with the appropriate federal agencies, and signed by Richard Walsh himself. Still active, still binding. And absolutely completely violated the moment Brandon said, "We'll be handling project management through our new digital systems." I didn't forward that information out of spite. I forwarded it because it was my job, even if they'd just told me I didn't have one anymore. I opened my laptop and drafted the email. Short, professional, no emotion. The kind of communication I'd been sending for 18 years. Subject: Federal Compliance Breach Alert. Contract FB 2902023. Body: per attached executed amendment dated March 15, 2024, I am formally flagging a potential compliance breach related to mandatory safety oversight for Interstate 85 Bridge Reconstruction Project. Termination of designated federal safety coordinator without required federal approval may constitute violation of Section 7C. Please confirm receipt and advise on remediation procedures. Attached: Contract FB 2902023 PDF, Amendment 12D, Safety Coordinator Requirements, PDFCC, Internal Legal Counsel, Federal Highway Administration Regional Office, State Department of Transportation, BCC, Patricia Moore, Regional Compliance Director, Federal Highway Administration, send. I stared at the screen for 30 seconds after hitting send, then closed the laptop. This wasn't revenge. This was documentation, protocol. The same thing I'd been doing for 18 years while everyone else played corporate politics and chased the latest management fad. Then I opened the contract one more time, just to be absolutely sure I remembered the language correctly. There it was, in black and white, Section 7C. In the event that designated Federal Safety Coordinator Gordon Hayes is terminated, transferred, or removed from active project participation without written consent from Federal Highway Administration, said removal shall constitute material breach of federal safety protocols and grounds for immediate project review up to and including work stoppage with cause. Simple, clear, unambiguous. Signed by Richard Walsh, CEO of Apex Infrastructure Solutions. Oh, Richard, your boy just stepped on a landmine he thought was a speed bump. I scheduled a backup email to send at 7:30 a.m. the next morning. Same documents, different audience, the CFO, the VP of Operations, my former direct supervisor who once told me, "Gordon, you worry too much about regulations. Clients just want results." They'd care about regulations now. I shut the laptop, made myself dinner, watched the evening news like any other Friday night. But something had shifted. You know that feeling when storm clouds are building, but the air gets perfectly still? That electric moment before everything changes, when you can almost hear the pressure building in the atmosphere? I'd already made my move. Now I just had to wait for 8:15 a.m. The next morning, Richard Walsh opened his email to find a subject line no CEO ever wants to see before his second cup of coffee. Urgent. Federal Safety Violation Alert. Contract FB 2902023. He clicked it. Read it. Stopped breathing for about 10 seconds. The email was from Patricia Moore herself, Federal Compliance Director for the Regional Highway Administration, the kind of government official who doesn't waste words because every word she writes can cost someone millions of dollars. The message was exactly 5 lines. That made it worse. This correspondence confirms receipt of documentation suggesting breach of federal safety protocols under Contract FB 290-2023. Termination of designated safety coordinator Gordon Hayes without prior federal approval constitutes violation of Section 7C. Per federal guidelines, this triggers mandatory project review and potential work stoppage pending investigation. Immediate response required. Within 48 hours, failure to respond may result in contract termination with cause. No pleasantries. No hope this finds you well, just impact, delivered with the efficiency of a sledgehammer to the chest. Richard turned slowly toward Brandon's office. The door was open. His son was at his desk, scrolling through his phone with the casual confidence of someone who'd never read a federal regulation in his life. Probably checking LinkedIn to see how many people had liked his post about disrupting traditional industries. Richard stood up like a man coming out of deep water. He walked across the executive suite in measured steps, stopped at Brandon's door and said, barely above a whisper, "Tell me you got federal approval before firing Gordon." Brandon looked up from his phone, blinked twice. "What?" Richard didn't repeat himself, just walked into the office, set the printout gently on Brandon's keyboard, and watched his son's face change color as he read. I didn't know." "About Section 7C, Brandon stammered, his voice getting higher with each word. "Nobody told me about federal coordinator requirements. The HR department didn't mention anything about approvals." Richard looked at his son the way you'd look at someone who just drove through a guardrail and wondered why the car was falling. "Section 7C was added when you signed off on the safety amendment," Richard said, his voice tight as a steel cable under load. "Gordon wrote it. You approved it. March 15th. Your signature is right there on page 12. "But nobody flagged it as important," Brandon protested, gesturing at the paper like it had personally offended him. "Gordon didn't need to flag it," Richard snapped, not yelling, just unraveling. "Gordon was it." Back at his desk, Richard's phone was already lighting up like a Christmas tree in Times Square. Federal Compliance Office, State DOT, Regional Transportation Authority, Legal Department calling from 3 different numbers. 6 missed calls. 8, 10. He looked through the glass wall separating him from the rest of the office. The building was starting to hum with crisis energy. People walking faster, voices getting quieter, calendars getting cleared, the kind of controlled panic that happens when everyone realizes the ship isn't just taking on water, it's already listing to one side. You don't streamline a $290 million federal project by firing the guy named in the safety clause, Richard said, turning back to his son. "I didn't fire him," Brandon tried, reaching for any explanation that might stick. "I optimized his position, transitioned responsibilities to automated systems." He BCC'd the federal compliance director on his exit notification, Richard said, waving the printout. "There's no optimizing that, there's no spinning that, there's just a federal investigation and whatever comes after." Brandon's face went pale. "Well, maybe if the company wasn't so dependent on one person." Richard's voice cut through him like ice water. "If your last name wasn't Walsh, you'd be optimized out of here by lunch." And just like that, the silence in the room became radioactive. By 10:30 a.m., it wasn't whispers anymore. It was full scramble mode. The legal team tore through contract files like archaeologists looking for buried treasure. Pages flying, folders opening, emails being searched by date, keyword, and attachment type. There was no backup federal safety coordinator, no transition plan, no delegated authority documentation, no evidence of the required 30-day federal notification period. Nothing except Brandon's termination memo, which proudly declared that Gordon Hayes has been optimized out as part of our digital transformation initiative. His responsibilities will be absorbed by our automated systems and strategic workflow optimization. Automated systems for federal safety compliance. Patricia Moore's office tried calling the company 6 times. No answer. The 7th call went straight to an automated message system that cheerfully informed callers that their call was important and would be answered in the order received. By 11:15 a.m., the weekly federal compliance call was officially missed. That call had never been missed. Not during ice storms, not during equipment failures, not even the week the main office lost power for 3 days and we ran everything off backup generators. The silence from Washington was deafening. At 2:43 p.m., the second shoe dropped. Not from Patricia this time, but from the State Department of Transportation. Subject line was neutral enough. Project status inquiry. Interstate 85 bridge reconstruction. The body wasn't neutral at all. In light of recent personnel changes and lack of formal federal notification, we are implementing immediate work suspension on Interstate 85 bridge reconstruction project pending verification of safety protocol compliance. All on-site activities must cease within 24 hours. Failure to comply will result in contract termination and federal contractor rating suspension. Work stoppage on a $290 million project because a 28-year-old with an MBA thought he could replace 18 years of federal expertise with smartphone apps and artificial intelligence. Carol Price, the CFO, actually stood up from her desk and said, "You have got to be kidding me," loud enough to make the entire accounting department look up from their computers. 3 days later, while Brandon was pacing his office trying to figure out how to unfire someone, I was sitting in a coffee shop downtown, signing incorporation papers for Hayes Federal Compliance Consulting, specializing in project recovery, regulatory oversight, and strategic federal relationship management. The irony wasn't lost on me. Within a week, Patricia Moore's office sent one final email to Apex Infrastructure Solutions. Federal review complete. Work authorization may be restored upon confirmation of compliance safety oversight. Recommend immediate engagement of qualified federal coordinator. Suggested contractor, Hayes Federal Compliance Consulting, LLC. I never sent a gloating email, never bad-mouthed them to other contractors. Didn't need to. The work spoke for itself. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting mad, it's being right, and being prepared. And knowing that competence, unlike arrogance, never goes out of style. They thought they were firing dead weight. What they really did was cut the anchor chain while standing in deep water. And me? I just built my own boat. A better one. Experience isn't just knowledge. It's knowing which knowledge matters when everything goes wrong, and having the relationships to make it stick. The difference between being replaced and being irreplaceable isn't how hard you work. It's how much you understand the consequences when the work stops.